My name is Wade Ellery. I'm with Radiant Logic. I'm going to be talking to you today about acting on digital transformation. Now, I was going to lead with the fact that by this time in the morning I've had 3 cups of coffee, so this will be a very frenetic presentation. But I've actually been trapped in this room for the past 2 hours, so I haven't had any coffee at all. So if I slow down or fall asleep, just nudge me. But the concept of digital transformation is actually kind of a code word. We've struggled in our industry with acronyms and with names of things. If you talk about MDM, master data management, if you're over 30, mobile device management, if you're under 30. So that alone it can be difficult to understand. Digital transformation is really sort of a code for customer identity management. And what we're seeing now is a real growth in that space where companies have spent a lot of time over the past few decades trying to get their arms around their internal identity management, their employees, their partners, their vendors, their suppliers. And for a lot of organizations, they have a fairly mature model around their internal employee side business. Some of them we talk to, though, it's still the Wild West. People are still running around all over the place with no clear view of all their internal users. But at the same time, our industry has gone through a massive transformation. If you're over age 55, how do you buy insurance? And I actually remember doing this. I sat across the desk from my insurance agent. He asked me what car I had. I handed him my registration form. He'd write on paper. His secretary would type things up, and I'd get things in the mail a month later. And if I had a change, I had to get in the car and go down and catch him between 9 in the morning and noon, because at noon he closed his office and went to lunch. And you just couldn't find the guy. But if you're under 28, and these are arbitrary choices, how do you buy your insurance? Well, it was born online, raised on technology, majors in efficiency. You may remember that pitch from Esurance. Now we have Dennis Quaid actually now promoting this particular solution, but you do it online. You do it with an application. You don't talk to a person anymore. I actually don't know if my insurance company has an office in my town. I don't believe they do. I only access them now through the internet or over the phone. And that really is having a challenge, or was a challenge, for the major providers of insurance: State Farm, Allstate, Farmers, Progressive, USAA, Liberty Mutual, the ones who have been in business for a long time on the old model. How do you adapt to that change? How do you make that happen? So we have to, first of all, look and see, what do customers expect now? And it's not even expect or want, it's demand. Because we've raised a whole generation now in an internet world where the assumption is that I can get everything at Google speed. If it takes longer to get an answer about my insurance than it does to find out what the gross national product of Uzbekistan is, then your system isn't running right. You need to fix it. It's not operating quickly enough. But at the same time, I don't want to just find out what my next premium is on my car insurance. I want to see my fire insurance for my home. I want to see my vacation home included in there. I want to see what my kids' insurance is doing. I want that Amazon experience. You should know everything about me. I should be able to get access to that one place easily. And if you're really doing your job, you're going to suggest things to me that I don't already have, that I really thought in the moment, wow, that's a great idea. I should get a Kindle because I need to read more books, or whatever might be the suggestion that you're making. So this is the world that we're competing in. But our infrastructures, our environments, the world that our internal customer management systems operated in weren't built for that. They weren't designed for that. And these are brick and mortar organizations. If you think of those names of the insurance companies at the bottom there, they've been in business for hundreds of years in some scenarios. They built this infrastructure around the idea you sat across a desk and talked to somebody. You typed information on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope, and mailed it to someone, and they got it 5, 10, 15 days later. If they didn't call your office when you were sitting at your desk, they didn't get a hold of you. This is not the world we work in today. Most executives now, 94%, and these are actually older figures that I got from a while ago from CA, are facing increased pressure to release apps more quickly. The demand from the business is, I need to get digital. I need to compete. Esurance is eating my lunch. I need to be on the internet with a tool that people can look at. And if they can't easily get to my information, I don't give them that Google experience, they're going to move. And 25% of users will abandon a web application in less than 6 seconds. Actually now 68%, and that was in 2015. I would bet we're probably over 80% now. If it takes more than 6 seconds for something to happen, people vote with their mouse. They can go someplace else. I've done it myself. I've been frustrated with a credit card company whose site wouldn't load fast enough. There's 100 of them out there. I can get anyone I want. I went someplace else. And most companies now are trying to monetize their data assets. I did a presentation a while ago on the concept that if you look at the balance sheet for major corporations, there's a line there for goodwill. If you're Coca-Cola, your company has value on its balance sheet for the fact that your company's named Coca-Cola and everybody knows who you are. The data assets that corporations are accumulating, more than just Google and Facebook, but every company that accumulates customer information, customer profile data, buying habits, manages and farms that information, is creating value that they'll put on their balance sheet in the next 5 years. You'll actually start seeing a line item. I think you start watching accounting move towards understanding that there is monetary value in data. Not just simply selling it to somebody else, but your business is more effective and more powerful to compete in the marketplace. The better data you have about your customers, the more you have that information available. So we're seeing that more and more in the space. So what do we do about this? How do we meet those requirements? And this is a presentation, and this is some information actually shared by Catherine Besant with Bank of America. She's the Chief Operations and Technology Officer. She published this online, so I'm using this as a reference just basically to make some of the points that she did about what you do when your company, a multi-decade or century-old brick-and-mortar organization, tries to compete in a technology space. First, try to be ubiquitous. The ability to market across multiple social media endpoints. If you've got Instagram because you're following your kids' adventures in college, you're also getting advertising on there. If you've got Google Gmail, you get advertising every time you open your Gmail. One of the tricks my friends play now is they actually send their other friends emails for things like, have you bought that accordion yet? Hey, have you picked out the accordion you want? And now their inbox is flooded with accordion ads. You can manipulate the system on that level. But the idea here is be everywhere. Be in everyone's face. Be the choice they have, or at least the reminder that, hey, if you're thinking about it, click right here. Because a lot of decisions made now are in the moment of, oh, you know what? I've been meaning to do that. It's right in front of me. Why not click and go ahead and do that? And be flawless in your execution. Because if you click on that link and it's broken, it's slow to load, it's not what you expected, that moment's gone. And the next time I see your ad, I'm going to go, yeah, I'm not going there again. That was a disappointing experience. Because we've been conditioned now mentally for a immediate gratification feedback loop. And if you think about it, it is immediate gratification. The old days where I typed things, it took me 20 minutes to type out a simple letter. It took me a week to send it. It took a week to get a reply back. Immediate gratification wasn't the way we did business. But now everything is immediate. Fast, convenient food has to be available immediately. Everything is designed to be at your fingertips. If you don't experience that, you'll go find it someplace else. And again, we're trapped in that Amazon experience, that Google speed. Speed is critical. You've got to get latency out of the system everywhere you can. Again, these are the pointers that the lady at Bank of America was pointing out to her infrastructure when they're building it. You've got to be able to deliver speed. You've got to be able to make sure the system can integrate information. If you remember back now, and this analogy is getting dated, 10 years ago, we rolled out the healthcare.gov initiative. Obamacare rolled out. And if you remember that, it was all over the news. People were spending half a day, waiting for the system to come back to tell them if they got a discount on their health insurance, because in real time, the system was trying to query IRS and Social Security databases and correlate that information with your user profile and make a calculation and deliver an answer. You get $9 off on your insurance. That didn't work. It collapsed. Not only the load, but it collapsed because the system they were using couldn't make those calculations fast enough, and it became a major black eye on the rollout of the solution. And you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Now, there weren't a lot of alternatives to free healthcare, so people came back. But if that was an insurance company rolling out their highly advertised, and I'm not picking on insurance companies per se, say it was a financial institution with its whole new checking system that was going to be the best thing in the world, and you go on there and it fails to load and won't work, you're not going to give it a second chance. You're not going to come back. And then on top of that, leveraging big data. Making sure that what you're offering is right in front of the person who's making that choice when they want it. This is the Amazon experience, and Bank of America recognizes this. You can't give me offers for things I don't care about. But if I did anything to look at a CD rates, then you want to be flooding me with opportunities to get a CD at Bank of America for an optimum rate or a special introduction or something that makes me feel that I'm special and this is something I should act on immediately because I have a limited time. All these mental triggers that we've learned to use to manipulate behavior need to be incorporated into the system. But to do that, you have to understand your customer. You have to know who they are. You can't just do this on a blanket model. You can't market snow shovels to everybody. Only a certain subset of the market needs snow shovels at a certain time. So what does an immature customer identity management environment look like? What does it look like when it's failing? Well, these are quotes you get back from customers saying, look, why are you asking me to fill out the same information multiple times? And this is a major form of frustration. I registered on your site, I filled out my data, I went someplace else and I had to put the same information in again. I had this experience recently. Marriott merged with Starwood. I had my Marriott information in there for 10 years. My address, my home address that my billing is against is in there. They merged, they wiped that out. I went to make a reservation and was told I couldn't do the easy reservation button because my information wasn't complete. I had to re-enter the data. Personally, I was a bit offended that Marriott couldn't get their act together enough to get that information in the system. They already had it, they just had to integrate it. Now, it may have been a technology challenge, it may have been a priority challenge, it may have been someone didn't think it was important, but for me, my feelings about that scenario were negative because of that experience. Now, I love Marriott, I'll continue to use them, there's not a challenge with that, but I tell the story now. And if you have a bad experience, you'll tell 5 people. If you have a good experience, you'll tell 2. So you want to make sure that people have good experiences. Now, why are you asking me multiple times who I am? Why are you making me authenticate multiple times to different parts of your application? And this again goes to the nature of the back-end systems. These were built as siloed platforms. If I had a banking application and I had a checking application and a savings application and an investment application, those were built by different people 10 years ago. They're sitting on different mainframes. They're sitting on different back-end platforms. The credentials in there aren't the same. And if they haven't been integrated, then I have to authenticate and log into each of those systems to gain access to that information. And that causes frustration. You have to integrate authentication. Single sign-on within your customer application has to be there. The people expect it at work. Although I find at work, we're still talking to a lot of companies where I'm still logging in with 23 different credentials, although it's 2019. But if you do ask a customer to do that, again, they're going to find an easier place to go. And then why don't I have access to all my accounts? Why do I have to go multiple places, or why can't I see everything? I had a recent challenge where I had a rental property it was damaged. I went to the website and they were able to give me access to all the claims on my primary residence, but my rental property residence wasn't linked in the claims application, although it was linked to other places, so I couldn't see that information. So again, I had to get on the phone and spend time doing things in the old-fashioned way where I expected to have that seamless experience. And then, why are you offering me accordions? Really? I don't want accordions. My kids, my friends are messing with me. But understand context, understand your customer, understand what they're looking for. How do you do that? You accumulate information about them, you bring that information to place, but you keep it in context. You understand the value of the information, you're able to link it to a user, and not just a one-to-one list of all the things that may be associated with this user, but relationship in the way that information is put together. So what's driving customer identity management today? Digital business initiatives. The transformation from the sit across the desk to the web, to the tablet, to my computer, to my phone. Something like 70% of the transactions being done now are being done over phones. And for me, that's kind of crazy. This screen is so small. But I booked an airline flight last night on my phone, sitting on the plane waiting to get off, because that was so easy and I could do it so quickly. It is where the transactions are going. So this digital business model requires a 360-degree view of the user. I can book my reservations, I can travel wherever I want to because my account understands everything about me. It knows my preferences, it knows what I have in terms of loyalty points, it knows all the different things about me. I fill very little information in. I'm not typing on my little tiny keypad with my big fat fingers. Most of that information is there and available to me because the system knows that. And it's integrated the operations. My reservations model is integrated into my check-in model. I don't have to re-enter my information. When I go back onto the phone to get ready to fly, it says, hey, you've got a reservation to check in. Do you want me to go ahead and check you in? Press yes. Bang, I did one button and I got that process done. And I make that frictionless for the user. I make it easy for me to experience. And then I modernize my homegrown systems. Now the back-end systems, I gotta mention, if you've worked in the airline industry or worked for them, you understand what Sabre is. Sabre was the original reservations platform. That was a gigantic mainframe monstrosity that the travel agents would type on those odd keyboards for half an hour trying to get you tickets to Hawaii. But that's the system that's back-ended my little phone app where one button gets me there because they've taken that information, modernized it, understood context, understood how to relate that information together, and how to build that complete solution. So if you're going to digitally modernize your business, you need to consider all of these particular functions in your product. Now, delivering that is a multi-step process. You really need to first start with aggregating information. I want to go back and understand all the places my customer identity information is. Now, this isn't just solely for customer data. If you think about it from an internal employee, partner, vendor model, anytime I look at identity as a concept, I need to be able to make my market, my infrastructure more frictionless, more ubiquitous, easier and better to use. In fact, to some degree, you're competing for talent by being able to provide them with a wonderful, seamless experience. I'm a generation or three away from this, but my understanding is that the latest college graduates are quite picky about the way their business runs their environment and what they have access to and how all that works. So you need to be able to provide as effective a business as possible and step that up. So first is aggregating, getting all that information into one place and be able to manage that. But on top of that, you've got to secure that identity information. This is a big challenge for organizations because if you start to digitize this data, if I was still on paper files, it's very difficult for a hacker to go into a company and Xerox 150,000 personal records. But if I can get into your system and I can get to that data and it's not encrypted, it's not stored properly, it's not secured, I can get millions of records very quickly. And that information becomes available and becomes public and becomes, again, a black eye on the scenario. So you need to understand security is critical to this because once you've aggregated information, you need to tie it up. But then you need to enrich that data. You need to make sure this is valuable information. You need to make sure the information has all the data you need. So that means incorporating another additional sources of information. It's not just the database that stored the user information, it's all his account information, it's all the purchases he's made, it's his historical information, it's his relationships, and potentially it's information I pull from other external sources like the internet about my user. Now, to some degree, this is a little bit like 1984 where you know way too much about me, but that's the world we're living in. And until we all agree that we're going to be benign, good custodians of business information, we're going to compete on this. So you need to be able to incorporate this, and then how philosophically the company acts after that is a decision to be made at a higher level. And then delivering, again, as mentioned by the lady from Bank of America, seamless user experience. You need to integrate this all into one continual platform. But you also need to be able to scale. You need to be able to build out now on a layer that understands that your customer base, depending on the size of your company, may be 100,000 users, maybe 1 million users, it may be 100 million users, it may be 1 billion users. Your scope and scale for this goes out dramatically. So you have to be able to scale. And our homegrown or internal identity employee side systems weren't built necessarily to scale in the millions. They were built for the largest private corporation is about 450,000 employees directly. So you don't have that kind of scale that you do when you start talking about customers, but you have to be able to scale to the customer side. Now, I don't know if you recognize these two buildings, and I'm going to explain the difference between these two. The one on the right there is the Salesforce.com building in San Francisco. Mark Benioff built that building. One of the things he was quoted on saying recently was, I can go anywhere in San Francisco and I can see my building, because that is the tallest structure in San Francisco. It sticks up like a big white cigar in the middle of San Francisco. And to some end, you would think like the Empire State Building, it would be the most famous, most visited building in San Francisco because it's the tallest. It's not. It's the one next to it that is actually most visited by tourists today. That's the Millennium Tower. Now, the Millennium Tower is shorter. It's an apartment building. It's not a business operation. Why is it more visited by tourists today? Because it is tipping 12 inches and settling 14 inches into the ground. It is slowly falling over. It is the Leaning Tower of Pisa of San Francisco. And the difference between those two buildings is, on the right-hand side, Mark Benioff drilled down to bedrock and made sure he hit rock when he started building this building. The Millennium Tower didn't invest in that foundation. They didn't go all the way down because that was expensive. They thought if they went down far enough and put enough security in the ground, they'd be close enough. And you've probably seen those commercials on TV recently. I think they're quite entertaining, that it's good enough. Like I put the carnival ride together last night, and I think I got it right. You know, well, they thought that was good enough. Now that building is tipping. They actually have windows popping and multi-million-dollar apartments in there that are worth a lot less than they were originally because they're having to go in and try and put that building back together. My point being, when you're looking at this whole customer identity management model, the foundation you build on is critical. You want to get it right up front. You don't want to go back after you've failed a launch or a system doesn't scale or a user doesn't have the experience they want and try and rebuild your foundation to build this, because everything we've talked about lives on a foundation. So customer identity data is also different than traditional identity data. So as you're building this foundation, you have to understand you've got structured and unstructured data. You've got sourced information in many different repositories, and you'll often lack common identifiers. I identify as W. Ellery in one policy. I'm 9927849 on another policy, and I'm I don't know, boat 2729 on a third policy within a particular company. So putting all that information together, building that foundation is a challenge unto itself. So your new identity store, where you put all this information has to be able to incorporate multiple extensible schemas. It has to be able to understand data from multiple sources and bring that into a common format. And supporting unlimited attributes per user record, because unlike the identity space where I had a fairly limited schema, when I start talking about customers, their systems came from databases primarily. Databases didn't have a controlled schema. They didn't have a subset. I may have used F name and L name in one system and first and last in another. I may have used given and SN for some odd reason in another database. All this variation within the system, and then all the attributes that I have to pull in from that platform, you need something that's not your grandma's LDAP directory or AD domain or regular directory structure that you're used to working with for internal users, because the scope of the customer side is so large. But it also needs to be flexible and extensible. I need to be able to change on the fly because I'm in a competing market and I'm driven by my customer side demands. So the business is going to come to me and say, hey, we have this new initiative. We need to bring all this new information in from this third party. We just sourced all this data from. We need to incorporate it in the user profile. We need to get it out on Wednesday. And you're going to say, yeah, $500,000, 3 developers in 2 years, I'll be right on it. You can't let the system sit like that. It has to be fast, flexible, and extensible. You have to be able to respond. And then it has to be platform schema and protocol agnostic, because I may start out doing a web application and I may end up on a mobile application. I may be starting out with database data, and I may be serving it up as a cloud application. I am transforming and translating this data on the fly, so I have to have a very powerful and flexible system. And I've got to be able to fully index this for free text search. That's critical because the systems that my customers are going to expect is that I can input one thing and get everything you know about me. I can key field and information. I can put in my car model, and you're going to pull me up my car insurance information for that. I can be able to access this data. So to make that user experience seamless, I need to be able to build that free text search into the back end. And then context aware. Context is critical. The more connections you have between information, the more valuable that information is. If I am GE and I know you own a refrigerator, or I know I sold a refrigerator, I know what the serial number is, that's a piece of information of very low value to GE. But if I know that that refrigerator resides in a house in Lafayette, California, and it belongs to somebody named Wade Ellery, and it has a service account on it for replacing the water filter, and it has a credit card associated with that service account, and the maintenance account has automatic ordering, and the refrigerator is smart enough to call GE and say, hey, my water filter needs to be replaced. GE's AI system, without a human being intervention, can send me a water filter on my credit card to my house because of the context, because of the connection of those 7 different systems and 7 different platforms. That data all exists in different scenarios in different places. But if I build that together, I get a seamless experience for me as an end user. I get a filter in the mail. GE made money. I feel happy because I didn't have to think, which I love not to do. And it all happened because I could relate that information together. So if you look at your customer data, the more you can integrate that data, the more you can build relationship between the objects, between the different data sets, the more value it's going to come out of it. And the higher customer retention you're going to have, the more you're going to have customers that come back. If you sent me a water filter last Wednesday, I'm not looking for a new refrigerator because my water tastes bad. I just put the new filter in. I'm now thinking, well, I can't get a new refrigerator for 2 years because I just bought a new water filter, and God knows that was an $18 investment. I don't want to give it up. Those kind of things are actually in the mind. One of the large customers we work with makes tractors. And you think, well, you know, what's a tractor is as far away from customer-centric property as you can think of. They don't actually make tractors. They make giant driving computers that have implements on the back to manage the soil. But these are rolling computer systems that monitor everything they do. And when you hook up a fertilizer truck to the back, it actually tells the tractor how much fertilizer it spread per square inch on the ground. When you lay down seed, it tells you how much seed you laid down. So what this system does now is it collects all that information about all the things that tractor did and brings it back to the company. And then they provide the farmer with a full view of, on this tract of land, you planted this much seed and this much fertilizer. With this forecasted rain, you're going to have this much harvest, and this is your primary harvest day. So you got to make sure your equipment's available to be able to be ready to harvest on May 13th, because that's the optimum day to do it. They're using AI to increase crop yields and to use that information. Now, if I'm a farmer and I've got a half dozen big green tractors that all talk to each other, and a guy with a red tractor company comes along and says, hey, we got a sale on red tractors, do you want one? I'd love to, but it won't talk to my green tractors, so I can't buy it. I'm now locked in because the connections around these systems, the integration of these platforms now makes me a lifelong customer unless I do a complete rip and replace, which I'm not going to do because I'm getting value out of it. So retention is critical in that scenario. So how do you build this? How do you make this happen? If you look at the number 3 there on the left, or that large mess in the middle, this is the nature of interreactions of most information. I've got connectivity between different objects, and that creates a chain of information. Within this room, you probably know somebody that knows somebody else in this room. You just don't know you know them through an association with somebody else. There was the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, that everybody could be related by 6 relationships back to Kevin Bacon within the industry. In our identity industry, I think it's the 3 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Within 3 associations, you know somebody that knows somebody. So we create these webs of a relationship, but they're really hard to represent and operate with unless you've got massive compute power to do all the calculations. So how do you make this information valuable? You build hierarchical structures out of it. So if you look at that large model, it's broken down into 3 subsets that are just smaller relationships that can be managed. So the key here is take these complex multidimensional relationships and then make them into linear hierarchical models that represent data in the way you need it for a particular purpose. But don't do that once, do that over and over and over again from that set of information. You keep, every time you go back, you yield more value from your data. And the more information you integrate, the broader and deeper that integration becomes, the more value you get out of that data, the more this is usable. So you end up with a simple attribute to object to attribute to key value relationship. And a simple model here is in the healthcare industry. I've got a patient. He's related to a hospital and an insurance company and a doctor. But also I can flip that same data set around, same data, same relational key fields, and say this doctor through this hospital has this patient that got this particular prescription from this pharmacy. Or if I'm a pharmacy or I'm a drug company, I can say, hey, I just paid for 17 prescriptions from 6 different pharmacies prescribed by 3 different doctors. And there's an interaction here that could kill you, but nobody sees it because they're looking through the single line of relationship they have. So by being able to maneuver this information around and to blend it and transform it and re-relate it, I get value out of it. Now, not just saving people's lives, but if you're talking about customer retention, customer upsell, which is a big part of digital customer management, is upselling them more information, more opportunities. You have to understand what they have and what they don't have and all those relationships to be able to upsell that data and that information. But this is a challenge because traditionally we put all this information in databases, and that just is a stream of data that we're trying to aggregate and correlate and flow into a unified presentation for the users. So database backends are not going to perform authentication and authorization or build that user experience effectively. That data is going to be difficult to integrate and to manage necessarily. You need to have a model that allows you to scale at the level we were talking about, to operate with all the requirements that we're looking at before, and to provide that multi-contextual model that I can go back in and actually create those relationships, but then materialize those relationships, store that data. So I have at the speed of a directory the availability to understand that hierarchy of employee to orders to customers to products. Or let me flip it around. I'm on the product management side, products to shipping information to regions to employees so I can track all my orders. Or order details to employees to customers to billing info for the accounting department. All the same data reused over and over again. So every investment you make now pays out over and over and multiplies the value internally. And this helps you reap the investment you're making in customer identity management faster, because the half of the value here is ethereal. It's I'm going to have more retention, I'm going to have more upsell, I'm going to have better interactions with my customers, I'm going to get more customers that my marketing reaches. But the other half of it is just internally being able to make an investment once and then have it pay out over and over again within the system, not replicating and reproducing this investment over and over. Because the cost of these systems, especially when the scale you're talking about on the customer side, are massive. You talk about scaling for 50 million endpoint customers, you're spending a lot of money on infrastructure, you're spending a lot of money on systems, you're spending a lot of money on those platforms. You don't want to reinvest them over and over again. Now, this is a simple example of a multi-access management model that we ran into recently. A large utility company was rolling out a new application. They built a web-based model that was backed in by CA SiteMinder talking to eTrust directory, and all the data was in the eTrust directory. That worked out great. People could go to the website. They could get their billing information. They could make changes to their services with the utility. But the other group in the organization said, yeah, but we're going to build this mobile app because everybody's mobile now. They want to get it off their tablet. We're going to use Gigya from SAP as our mobile backend, which uses a whole different database store to store the data in a whole different format. And we're going to make this available. We're going to roll them out at the same time. And somebody said, wait a minute. You're going to tick people off because I'm going to go into my mobile app and set my password. And I'm going to go home and log onto my desktop and it's not going to work. or I'm going to make a change in my mobile app and my desktop isn't going to reflect that. And I'm going to get a lot of frustration, and what you're going to do is generate a lot of phone calls now, and all my idea of digitizing this went down the tubes because I'm going to end up with a lot of diversity here. So again, it's that foundational layer. It's a layer you can lay in at the bottom of this model that says, okay, let me connect to all the sources of information. Let me bring all that data together, but then let me transform it and translate it and deliver it exactly as each system needs to see it. And let me recognize change in real time when it happens and replicate that change throughout the platform. And this is what Radiant Logic is doing at the bottom of this particular picture. We're connecting through Gigia's API-based interface with a real-time sync to their backend. So anything done on the web, on the tablet platform or the phone is immediately understood and recognized by Radiant Logic, and then applied to the eTrust LDAP backend so that on CA that experience is seamless. If I make a password change through CA, it's applied at eTrust, it's picked up immediately through changelog and applied on the Gigia side. It's an integration layer that says I've got two worlds here that don't talk to each other. If I lay a common foundation, if I integrate this data, now I can make this all work together. At the same time, I can take all the information that's in eTrust and all the information that's in Gigia and provide it in a unified view of the user and use that someplace else for something else. Again, it's that replicated use of data. Correlate the data once, build that user profile, enhance it as many ways as you can, and then reuse it over and over and over again. And if you reuse it more than 3 times, that the 4th time, it's paying for itself, or it's generating value in the system because it is actually enhancing the underlying value of that particular infrastructure. So just a simple model for how do I start and how do I go about and build this customer infrastructure. I've got my backend sources. I may have information in LDAP or AD. I may have it in SQL and REST. I may have it in cloud applications. More and more our customers are realizing now they are putting customer identity information up in the cloud. That is another island of identity information. You want to be able to incorporate that. We talked actually a couple of years ago with a large company that had all their customer information in Salesforce. And if you've used Salesforce, you've got a really nice relational database model there for accounts and contacts and all their data information. It's all right there, but there is no authentication model for Salesforce. I can't authenticate as a customer to my customer record in Salesforce unless you're doing case management. But you can extract that information from Salesforce. You can set up credentials in another store, link those together, and now I can use the investment I made in Salesforce in my complete customer profile as their ID and authentication to give them access to other applications. And I can then do authorization by querying data in Salesforce to decide whether or not you get access to certain functions in my customer portal. So again, that information, regardless of whether it's on-premise or in the cloud, is sources of data. Bring that information together. Now it's going to come in under different scenarios. I'm going to sync low-performing databases and cache that information. I might do real-time proxy to LDAP backends. I might bring information off a CIAM system and cache that locally. I may bring information off of a web application through SOAP or an API and bring that information and store it at the Radiant Logic level. And this is critical here because you can't make real-time queries to the back end. If you are going to the back end like we did with the rollout of Obamacare and trying to make those queries to those back-end systems in real time, you're going to fail to perform at the level the customers are expecting. But on top of this, you need to be able to add in the ability to add data directly into this store. You're going to have users that come in and register in that portal. So they need one place to go to write that record, and then you can decide how to write that data back to backends. You may update some backends, you may not. You may create a source of truth at that layer, and you may have additional data you're storing at the Radiant Logic layer that doesn't necessarily exist in the backend platform, because a lot of these backend platforms are still tied to processes that you can't break. They're still managing all of your billing system. You can't go back in and say, we're going to reformat the text fields in the billing system to match my identity platform for digital transformation. Your billing people will say, yeah, well, we'll just stop billing then because nothing's going to run if you break it. So you've got to be able to operate with the backend systems as they exist. And then you need to be able to bring that information forward and make that available. So you may be querying data off of external SaaS applications to get additional marketing and data about your customer. to enhance that profile. You may be using that information for authentication and authorization for the users into cloud applications, on-premise applications. Again, because you've made this ubiquitous identity store, it doesn't matter to the customer where you're hosting that app. It can be the web application that's hosted by CA. It can be the Gigia backend application off of your phone. They get a ubiquitous experience because the unified information is sitting behind all this. And you can run this now and then provision, if you need to, into cloud applications because you have a golden image now. You've got a control over exactly what that information looks like. And then when you merge with another organization, you simply add those sources of identity into your infrastructure, and your application-facing side just thinks the world got larger. You don't need to go through all the integration on the application side because they have a single unified place to look for that data. But I may have different applications that need different data. I may have a mobile app that needs REST data. I can feed it REST directly from this source. I may have a single sign-on platform that's looking for LDAP authentication. I can feed it from this source. I may need to route credentials back to a database because I store my user credentials back in a database and security said and the user's ID and password are never leaving that database. That's fine. I can still do the routing all the way back to the back end if I need to in that particular platform. Now, what we're looking at is, in most customer models, a global scenario here and a multifaceted model. So I have multiple identity stores spread around the country, around the world, around the organization. So you end up building sort of hublets of identity information or hubs of identity to serve particular purposes. I may have enough information on the left-hand profile there for a particular business use case that I can solve with that set of data. But in the middle, I need an even more enhanced set of data coming from additional sources so I can serve even larger business cases. So I can build the views and the correlation of the data to specific business uses without having to build this one-size-fits-all model or everything fits my one model. And that's the challenge that we've had in the past was I built this unified view, but it was one unified view. Everybody had to do it exactly the same. And after 6 months of meetings and agreeing on a compromise that no one liked, half the people left the room saying, ha, forget it, I'm going to build my own. This is never going to work. So you need a model that has that flexibility. And that's, again, what Radiant Logic provides is not only all that aggregation, but we can create what we call views of the data that are based on different protocols, different structures, different schemas, and different subsets of users to meet exactly the needs of each endpoint. Each application gets exactly what it wants in exactly the format, the schema, and the structure that it's expecting, hierarchical, flat, geographical, however it needs to be consumed, and that's delivered to the application from one source, but multiple views of that data. And that's the key sort of secret sauce to this model is make that investment once, reuse it over and over and over again. And as you talk about expanding out into the cloud and hosting information, you start to look at and understand very quickly that the key to all this expansion, the key to my global customer footprint, the key to expanding my model and servicing my requirements on-premise and in the cloud is I have to have ubiquitous identity information. I can't have an experience where one person sees one world and another person sees another unless that's intentional, or a user sees a different experience depending on where he goes and what he does. I have to have all this information available and be able to be synced across all these platforms. But on top of that now, we've got privacy requirements that are limiting what we can do. GDPR in Europe says German data that's personal to the customer can't leave German soil, and certain data can't be exposed at all. And now California has a similar statute in place that controls what you can do and what you can share in terms of customer data. So now I have to not only aggregate everything and bring it all together and use it, but wait a minute, I can't move it, I can't copy it, I can't distribute it. How do I work in that scenario? Well, with Radiant, you have the capability of proxying that data from the back end. So I can decide at the time of authentication, authorization, lookup, to make a query back to the back end and get the answer to the question without moving that customer data off the back end platform. So I can appear to someone in the United States, I'm a German customer, I'm traveling in the US on vacation, I go onto the website and it appears to me that my credentials are sitting right there, or my identity is sitting right there in the platform, because I'm seeing it like I would see it back home. But my data never left Germany. It was a particular call to the back end done in real time. There's a bit of a latency hit when you have to do that transformation, but better than me coming to the US and not being able to buy stuff while I'm here. Or I'm traveling and my credit card isn't working and I want to go online and figure out why, and I'm told, oh, you're a German citizen, you can't view your credit card information in the US. If you can get around that by proxying the data, now you have a model for delivering that kind of ubiquitous experience, especially if you're even on, for companies' platforms, if you've got executives in international companies that travel, one of their biggest frustrations is I cross borders, I lose access to everything. My US and Japanese models are not the same profile. How do you fix that for me? This is the model to do that. And multiple cloud, as we did in the presentation earlier, was cloud-based. And moving to the cloud, we're seeing more and more customers now in multiple cloud infrastructures. You're in Azure for Office 365, some SaaS applications. You're in Amazon because you're spinning up databases and directories and you're running applications. You're in Google Cloud because you've got a massive AI infrastructure. You're using all of Google's intelligent tools for tweaking your data and analyzing your customer data. But you need to make that information ubiquitously available, because if I make a decision in Google about AI and I try to apply it to an application in Amazon and it's not the same person, same information, same detail, system breaks. It doesn't work. It has to have a unified view. Identity is the one thing that fits into everything. So with that, I'll open up the room to any questions and happy to answer those for you if you have it. And thank you again for your attention today.